I am currently in the process of creating, writing and illustrating a children's book. I thought I'd take you along for the process of creating the very first spread in the children's book, and maybe I can share a couple of tips and tricks along the way. When I say I'm making the first spread, it's not the very first spread that I'm making, but the very first spread, like the opening spread in the book. So I've already made 2 other ones, but that was a while ago, so I'm kind of flipping through my sketchbook and trying to get back into the groove of drawing penguins to begin with. Even though these are not my strongest drawings ever, it was definitely important for me to kind of get back into the groove, ease myself back into the process of drawing these animals, which I am not usually particularly good at. For me on this day, this is my sort of opening process, these warm-up sketches. But in general, if you're working on a children's book, the very first step you obviously need is to create a story and a storyboard. Both of these I've already done, so I am just kind of screenshotting the relevant spread from my storyboard and importing it into Photoshop to use as a sort of base. I'm then just adding in the background color and text, and for the text I am sort of switching back to the very first spread that I made, so I can make sure that I use the exact same font, the exact same spacing, size and all that stuff. And you will see me switching back and forth between the two quite a lot throughout this process, so I can make sure the colors, the textures, the line weight, all of that sort of stuff is the same, so that the book will have a overall cohesive look. And then I just start drawing. I'm beginning with the background element, with, in this case, is Table Mountain in South Africa, and then moving on to the foreground, the penguins. You will see me take a while to get them right, and that is not only because, as I mentioned, it's been a while since I've worked on this project and have to get back into drawing these little characters, but also because I am still just getting used to working in Photoshop and with this graphic tablet. If you've watched a lot of my videos, then you might notice that this is actually the first time I am been working digitally using Photoshop to draw in and not Procreate. And even though I do think that there's a lot of things that Procreate is better for, it just feels more intuitive, more organic to work with, and definitely just having the drawing right on the screen that you're working on is a lot better than, in my case, using a graphic tablet that has no screen. But anyway, I'm still using it, and that is because I think if you're working on a book illustration or on an editorial illustration or anything that sort of needs layouting and text, I think Photoshop is just a lot better. And that is just because Procreate has unfortunately got a couple of limitations that Photoshop just doesn't. Guides and sizes are just a lot more accurate and more easily editable. The text tool in Photoshop is just miles better. I absolutely hate using the one in Procreate. You don't have to worry about limited layers when working on a larger file. You don't have to worry about elements being cut off when you move them off the canvas and back in, as is the case in Procreate. Shrinking things and scaling them back up doesn't affect the quality as it does in Procreate. Just the entire concept of smart objects is incredibly helpful when working on a book, and I could go on and on and on. So if you're working on a project similar to this and you do have Photoshop, then I would recommend working in there over Procreate, even if you want to make the actual illustration in Procreate and then import it into Photoshop to just do the layouting, text, moving around, editing sort of elements in there. I'd still think that is a better decision. That is actually what I did for the very first children's book that I made when I was about 17. That is 5 years ago now, isn't that insane? But anyway, if you want to see a video about that, is in the top right corner of the screen right now. That being said though, I want to make it clear that by no means is it impossible to create a children's book entirely in Procreate. You don't have to have access to Photoshop. All I'm saying is that if you do, it will make your workflow just a lot easier. You can still get it done in Procreate, that just might take you a little bit longer and cause you a bit more frustration. When the actual line art is done, I am moving on to colors. And as somebody who isn't great with colors and choosing the right colors, this is another aspect where Photoshop helped me out a lot. Within their color libraries, they've got different palettes that have different themes, and you can kind of pick and choose which ones you want and sort of make your own palette from that. Again, another thing where you don't necessarily need Photoshop, you can just download palettes online, and I think Procreate has a couple of them as well, but I find it a lot easier in Photoshop because they're just kind of integrated into the whole system. Anyway, having that just made my workflow a lot easier again, because it sort of limited me in the color choices that I had, which is a lot less daunting than having literally all the colors in the world, or at least all the colors visible on screen as a choice for you to pick from. A limited color palette also makes it a lot easier to have a coherent look throughout your book because you're using the same colors on every page. And I'm going for a overall sort of teal and orange look, which makes it look summery and sort of friendly and warm, and also works quite well because they're complementary colors and are pleasing to the eye. At this point, I just wasn't quite happy with the way the water looked, especially the transition between the water and the beach, and also the line art on there. I'd already gotten rid of a lot more than I had originally going into it, because sometimes when you add colors, especially in the background, too much line art can be a bit of a hindrance, even if it initially looks good when you put it in. So I just kind of changed the transition and got rid of the line art. I also then quickly redid the faces of the penguins and edited the plane a little bit before going over into shading. I'm using a screen tone brush with a lighter shade of red than the line art actually for the shadows, which I think gives it quite a nice summery feel, because obviously in the summer the sun is out, it is reflected of more objects around you, reflecting the ambient light and making shadows appear brighter. There are no penguins in Africa. Oh, but there are. They live on beaches around the Western Cape. How did they fly this far? Penguins cannot fly. Oh, but they can. They might not have strong wings, but they've got a plan.